Hello, welcome back to Jen's Books. I hope you're having a fantastic week. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the books that I've been reading so far in August. So it's sort of a first check-in of the month. I'm currently reading a bizarre mix, a gothic thriller that I've been not putting off, but wanting to read for ages, but haven't got around to. And also a young adult series that's back from the 60s or 70s, and it inspired a series that kind of freaked me out when I was a kid. So you've got all of that to look forward to in my next catch up. But so far in August, I have 6 books to share with you. Again, a bit of a mix of things. We've got works in translation, we've got a memoir, we've got some dystopian stuff, of course. But the first book that I read this month is Abi Morgan's This Is Not a Pity Memoir. And this is a memoir, obviously. And what I really love actually as well is if you take the cover off on this, it says it's a love story. So on the outside it says this is not a pity memoir, and inside it says it's a love story, which I think it is. But basically, I don't know a huge amount about Abi. I know that she's an Emmy award-winning scriptwriter, and she wrote The Split, which was on the BBC, which I didn't watch, but she's had a lot of success as a scriptwriter. And the story is about Abi Morgan and her husband. Her husband was suffering from MS. Her husband Jacob, who's also is a well-known actor, and due to the medication that he was taking for MS, he had a rapid decline. He was really poorly, which saw him being in a coma for the best part of a year. And Abi and Jacob's family sort of clustered around them to support them during that time, and their 2 children, Jessie and Mabel. And it was a sort of a nightmare series of continually watching Jacob fighting for his life. But then eventually, the best part of a year onwards, Jacob comes round, but it becomes very clear that he's not the same man he was, before he had this awful reaction to this medication. And it's all about them learning about each other again, and sort of accepting that things aren't going to be the same as they were. And that the worst thing is, after all of this time together, 20 years of marriage, he doesn't recognise her as his wife anymore. And so she has to get head around all of that as well. But it's just beautifully written. It's really heart-wrenching, and it has a positive ending as well. I don't want to sell it as being all grim, but she faces her own health issues as well at the same time. But it's really beautifully written, as you'd expect from an Emmy Award-winning script writer. There's humour in there as well, but it's really sad, but also, as I say, hopeful. So if you like a memoir, I'd definitely recommend this. It was published in 2022. It's quite a recent memoir. You may know more about Abi Morgan than I do. You might know about her scriptwriting work, but I thought this was a fabulous book. So definitely a recommendation, that I would like to pass on. Secondly, I read a dystopian fiction book, which I can't even remember where I heard about this now. It's called We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III. And I think I came across this on YouTube. I think another YouTuber sort of mentioned it, but I can't remember who, so apologies. But it's a strange little book, but the premise sort of I just had to read it straight away. Basically, it's a family in America. There's a terrible storm. Hurricane warnings come up, so the 4 of them go to shelter in their bathroom. And during the course of the night, the whole, it's a really terrible storm. The house is sort of ripped down around them, and when they go to leave the next morning, they're blocked into the bathroom. So it's about them dealing with the sort of survival of being stuck in this bathroom, which has running water, luckily, but also learning to survive with each other. And it's full of twists and turns, particularly when we find out that the narrator, the teenager called Mel, feels that she is responsible for the events. Her and her friend Amy have called something from the dark side into reality. And so we have Mel, we have a little brother Bobby, and we have a father who clearly has a drinking issue, and the mother, and they're having strain between their relationship too. It feels really Lovecraftian, actually, the ending, as it sort of all starts to fall apart. It didn't go in the direction I thought it was going to at all. It was really gripping. Is it the best book I've ever read? No. The characterization's not subtle or nuanced whatsoever, but it's been made into a film, and I can really understand why. It's a kind of really gripping premise, and as things, as I say, start to fall apart and that there's sort of supernatural elements coming in, it really was a page turner. So that is We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III, and not one, as I say, that I'd heard of before, but if you like a little bit of strange horror, gripping strange horror, then it's worth, you know, picking up if that sounds like it might appeal. The next book I read is another dystopian apocalyptic future, which is Metronome by Tom Watson. I really, really love this. This is definitely a firm recommendation. And the premise is it's a dystopian future where couples have to apply to have a baby, but they can't apply until there's a pregnancy, and if they're not successful, they have 3 attempts, they have to have an abortion. So it's not going to be an easy subject for everybody, but this particular couple, they fail twice, and on the 3rd time they decide to hide the child, but unfortunately because of this they're caught and they are sent to live on an island. The two of them, they're separated from their son, and this is 12 years on. They're due for parole, they're on this island, they've had to make it their own. It's a sort of tale of survival, and strange things have been happening in the previous years. There have been ships smashing on the shore. The contact with the parole officer has vanished, so they don't know what's going on, and the parole date comes and no one comes for them. And just to add it on as well, they're on an island and they have to take a pill every 8 hours because there is a sort of a toxic, there's something on the island that if they don't take this pill, they'll basically die straight away. So every 8 hours an alarm goes off and they have to take a certain pill, which means they can only go so far from their home as well. So I really, really love this. The characters are called Anna and Whitney. Whitney's an artist. He is really convinced that they're going to come and rescue him, and Anna is the mother of the child that they were hiding, and she is a bit more of a pragmatist, I would say. But yeah, I found this really, really good, really riveting, page turning. I think if you enjoy sort of dystopian apocalyptic fiction, this is one you're going to enjoy. It's really gripping, and as I say, it's about survival as well. So it's got it all. It's a really, really good book, and I really, really enjoyed it. So that's a recommendation. The next book I read is a library book called The White Hare by Jane Johnson. Now, this came out in 2022 as well, and as you can see, it's a bit more of a chunky one, and this is sort of more of a thriller, family saga, a kind of a novel. Well, I mean, I say it's a family saga, it's not like it's over decades or anything. But basically it's about a character called Mila and her daughter. They moved to Cornwall from London after it's revealed that her husband's actually a bigamist, and her mother, who's a really sort of strong and matriarchal figure, takes her daughter and her granddaughter, and they buy this house I think it's called White Cove, as a really sort of cursed reputation, and they do it up with an intent of using it as a guest house. But once they arrive in Cornwall, there's a lot of hostility towards them for taking this house, and then they meet this character called Jack, who seems to be homeless. He's sort of demobbed. He's come out of the Second World War. This is all taking place in the 1950s, which is a nice sort of historical touch, and it's about secrets and mysteries being answered. It's about families coming together, and it's about sort of pagan or old religions and traditions coming into conflict with new religions. And there's sort of lots of queer elements in it as well. So I did enjoy it. It's not my favourite book of the month, but if you like a sort of quite light thriller, you know, with a sort of tie-in with nature and the Gothic, and sort of houses on coastlines that are isolated in the 1950s, you're probably going to enjoy it. I definitely enjoyed it. I enjoyed finding out about the characters and the resolution. So quite a sort of light flick through read, but some really interesting questions to be asked about, you know, these old traditions. And the writer's clearly done her research. She's really drilling into you know, the mythology and the folklore of Cornwall. So found this interesting and enjoyable as well. Next, we've got a couple of books that were recommendations or came from Jen Campbell's channel. I think I've mentioned Jen Campbell before. If you've not found her, but she's definitely worth looking up. She's never done me too far wrong with her recommendations. The first one, and I'm sorry, it's yet another dystopian apocalyptic novel, but it's a Dutch novel that was has been translated. It's also from 1967, so it's a bit of an older novel. It's called Termush, and it's by Sven Holm. And I found this quite an interesting book. It wasn't the easiest to read. I don't know if it was down to the translation or just generally. But it wasn't hard, but sometimes the language choices and you know, I had to reread things a few bits. But basically, it's an unnamed narrator who survived a nuclear apocalypse. He's one of a group of people who've paid for protection. Basically, they were put into shelters, and now that the risk factor has been reduced, they're all staying in this really posh hotel. They've got staff looking after them, and basically they're pampered and protected. And so they're in this sort of bubble, not completely aware of what's happening outside of that. There's a lack of communication from the management as to what's going on beyond the boundaries. But then survivors start to appear on the door of the hotel, and it's about ethics and what we do with resources and how we react when we feel ourselves threatened, whether or not we'd sort of go for the humane approach, or whether we'd be more I don't know, more sort of driven by survival and personal safety. So it's quite an interesting, so it's just only a tiny little one, but it raised some really interesting questions, and I'd definitely pick it up. I'd definitely read it if you like dystopian fiction. And as I say, it's quite nice to read something that's a little bit older as well. It has a certain amount of that sort of style from the 50s, and it's translated by Sylvia Clayton. But yeah, I enjoyed that. Nice little flick through. Your book didn't take a long at all to read. It kept me gripped. It kept me wanting to read. So that's another book that you might be interested in if you like dystopian stuff. And I'd like to make it clear, I don't just read dystopian stuff. I try to read a broad range, but for some reason in August I've been drawn back to that. And even I mentioned before, I'm reading a young adult series from the 20th century at the moment that haunted me as a child, because it was the TV show of the series. Don't want to give too much away, and that also is an apocalyptic, but I don't just read that. I do try and read a wide range. The last book I've read so far in August is We Had to Remove This Post, which is written by Hanna Bervoets. It's another Dutch writer. It was published in 2022, and it's translated by Emma Rault. And this I really enjoyed. I mean, it doesn't hold back its punches. It's not going to be for everybody, but oh my goodness, I couldn't put it down. It really did grip me. Basically, it's the story of a character called Kaylee, who works in she originally works in a call centre, but through a series of bad romantic decisions, she ends up taking a job at a company called, I think it's called Hare, where they look at online content and decide what can be kept up and what needs to be removed from a platform. So certain things are allowed and certain things aren't. And she really prides herself on being able to know what the decisions are, what they can do and what they can't. But it's grim, you know, the work they're having to do is grim. They're having to look at awful things all day long and make decisions over what can be removed and what should stay in the public consciousness, whether or not, you know, when you're reading it, you're thinking, God, I can't believe they'd let something like that stay on a social media platform. But the story's about Kaylee and her friends, the friends that she makes. They're her girlfriend Sigrid, who she meets at this place, and how they all start to sort of unravel slightly and be influenced by the things that they're seeing. You know, some of them are suffering with mental health from looking at these awful things all day. Others start to believe in flat world, you know, theories and other bits and pieces. And there's somebody who starts saying that the Holocaust is you know, Holocaust denier, and it all kind of starts to crumble. And this particular character, it affects her in a different way. And by the end, we're not sure really how reliable she is to a certain point, but it's incredibly gripping. It's again a really, really small read. If you're interested in, you know, Women in Translation Month, then this is one that I would definitely recommend. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. As I say, it doesn't hold its punches. There's some stuff in there that not everybody's going to want to be reading about, and you know, it might be worth, if you're unsure, you know, having a little bit of a further look into it. But in terms of being a gripping and really thought-provoking book, really, really enjoyed this as one as well. So that's We Had to Remove This Post by Hanna Bervoets, translated from the Dutch by Emma Rault. So thank you very much for that recommendation, Jen. Really enjoyed it. So those are my 6 books so far for August, and I'm getting stuck in to read the next lot to share with you. I'd really like to know if you've read any of those books, whether any of those interest you. As I say, if you're new to the channel, I don't just read dystopian stuff, but I do enjoy it. So it does crop up quite regularly. But if you're new and you like what you've seen and you're interested in finding out about recommendations, then do like and subscribe. And I'll see you at the next video. Thanks again, everybody. Take care.